The Department of Justice wants to crack down on big tech. In a proposal to Congress, the DOJ recommends rolling back the liability shield for internet companies. It's been around for a long time. It suggested revisions to existing law that would change the way social media content is moderated. It's just the latest in the tug of war between Silicon Valley and Washington. Joining us now is Anish Chopra, the former White House Chief Technology Officer under President Obama, current president of CareJourney, a healthcare analytics firm. Anish, last time you were on, and that wasn't the only time, you've been begging for the industry to figure out how to do this with stakeholders in mind and how to do it themselves to prevent something like this. And they just, I don't know, they just have not. And now this is what you're seeing. It's a baby step, which it's not going to become law, do you think? But it just shows something's going on here that they should have tackled it themselves already.
Well, you know, it's a 25-year-old piece of legislation, and it's kept the industry in a reasonably strong footing. It's obviously an economic success story, but it was designed originally to give safe haven or room for the industry to do more to protect consumers. And we see today the challenges, misinformation, even amidst the pandemic, challenges around election interference, and even obviously historical challenges around terrorism and content around that. We have to see the industry do more. I will say several former colleagues of mine have now launched a professional society, getting the safety professionals working on the ground in these companies to come together to share best practices. But we have to do more to bring responsibility in these environments. And the industry can do this on its own. And the debate now is, does there need to be some baseline standards or requirements? And that's going to be a healthy part of the discussion. This piece of activity we're seeing here is more akin to political theater. But as we move forward, I think there is going to be an opportunity for a thoughtful discussion around how to set the right rules of the road for the next chapter of the internet.
Politically, it's hard to figure out who's where. I mean, it's bizarre. It's like there are some strange bedfellows here. The DOJ, it looks like it's trying to thread the needle between extremes and find some middle ground, like leave the Section 230 in there, but make certain things, if they're, for example, criminal, then that would give you, there's certain carve-outs you've had. But then you got someone like Vice President Biden wants to just get rid of Section 230, right? Because some people, it seems like the left is worried about election finagling, and the right's worried about conservative groups being kicked off of Twitter or Facebook. So you don't know. It's bizarre. Can you describe the landscape to me?
Just to give you a little perspective, if you agree that there's a problem, that there's information online that's propagated that perhaps is doing more harm, then the question is, do you want to see more engagement to bring some of that information off? Or do you want to see less? And I think that's the divide that you saw if you think of the good, the bad, and the ugly coming out of the DOJ report. The bad, if you were to think about, if you believe that there should be more misinformation, less moderation, then you might embrace some of the provisions in the DOJ report that say, look, unless it's absolutely criminal or very specifically narrowed, you can't really moderate. I'm not so sure that's where the majority of the American people are. I think the majority of the American people want to have honesty in our elections. They want to have some consistency and experience with respect to how misinformation is propagated. And to me, that means the industry should do more. And I think when you hear politicians on both sides of the aisle bring this issue up, the premise is in part, get the industry to move. But it's also to say failure to move is going to require us to set some baseline rules. You've seen this in the privacy debate where there's now almost bipartisan movement around establishing baseline fair information practice standards. So we have privacy protections on the internet. How we get there and finding a piece of legislation is going to take some time, but at least there's some rough consensus. In this area, the political parties seem to be at odds on whether we need more moderation or less. I'm on the more side, but I'm hopeful that the more will come from the industry getting a little bit more organized together on the ways we see it on the criminal side with intellectual property theft. If you accuse the platforms of stealing your copyright, your music, they have built technologies, they've built them to help identify those areas of copyright infringement, which is criminal. And they've moved some of that information in a more thoughtful way offline. So the notice and takedown procedures reflect a bit of an industry together to get there. And we just need to see some of that on the misinformation and election interference side.